Rule 6 always applies to all ships while underway. It states that the vessel shall only travel at a safe speed. This means that the vessel should be able to come to a complete stop from the speed at which she is traveling before colliding with another vessel or running aground. It's a good idea to come to a complete stop within half the visibility distance, so you have enough time to react to danger. The rule specifies factors to consider when determining a safe speed for all vessels. These include the amount of traffic, visibility, and how close you are to land or other hazards. There are also considerations for vessels equipped with a functional radar. These include how effective the radar is at detecting objects such as ships and ice, as well as how susceptible the radar is to interference.
Click the following icons to know more about rule number 6. Maintaining the safe speed. 1. Stop or turn more effectively. 2. Have more time to think and act in changing situation. And 3. If a collision occurs, the resulting damage is likely to be significantly less. Stopping distance.
Stopping the engine may be a good strategy to avoid or minimize damage if the searoom is restricted or when visibility is poor. In the open sea, where the main engine is set to full sea speed, slowing down may cause some delay due to the engine load management program. Thus, a quick maneuver could suffice, provided it is done in ample time. If the sea passage is limited or the water depth is shallow, it would be prudent to have the main engine always on standby.
Proper and effective action.
To be able to maneuver, vessel must have enough speed to maintain proper steerage and mobility. In some cases, increasing speed may be required to effect a turn in the shortest duration as possible. Maneuvering characteristics.
These characteristics are part of the knowledge helping the officer on watch, or OOW, to decide whether it is safe to maintain full speed. Specifically, the turning circle and the stopping distance play a large role in this decision. And remember that fast enough to maneuver, slow enough to stop in time. Rule 7. Risk of collision. Emphasize the importance of using all available means, which warns that assumptions shall not be made on the basis of scanty information, particularly scanty radar information. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. When assessing the likelihood of a collision, the following factors must be considered. Closest distance of approach. Type of waterway. Vessel size, condition and maneuverability. Speed. Distance out from closest point of approach. Relative bearing. When assessing the likelihood of a collision, the following factors must be considered. These are a few guidelines to follow, in addition to listen. Check incoming vessel's bearings with the compass. You must use your operating radar. If you have an UPRA, use relative vectors to determine collision risk and true vectors to determine the other vessel's actual movement. You must run a radar plot if you are not equipped with an UPRA. Ask yourself, is the target ahead of you or behind you? Is it going to clash, or is it going to slam into each other? Don't rely on UPRA for a precise closest point of approach, CPA. Changes in bearings should not be used as a clearance indicator. Finally, stay alert at all times. The next video will illustrate how risk of collision might exist. Rule 7 will help. This video illustrates how risk of collision might exist.
If no bearing changes are observed for a ship, a collision is possible. The risk factor is reduced if a ship's bearing changes by a significant amount. However, keep in mind that the bearing change must be substantial. This significant bearing change may not be valid in the following circumstances. First, the bearing may change when observing very large vessels that subtend a significant angle at the observer. Second, when monitoring a vessel up close, the bearing may change. Third, when approaching vessels engaged in towing. The entire tow and towed unit represent a very large object, and the bearing is subject to change. Always keep in mind that when obtaining a bearing, a fixed point on the target must be focused on, and the same point must be used for each bearing.
Also, you should be aware of the following crucial reminders when assessing the collision danger. There should not be any doubt in the minds of watchkeeper. To determine if risk of collision exists, it is advisable to be familiar with the chart, since this will give an indication of the course that the other vessel may be following to either head to or from a port or TSS. Taking all the above, the watchkeeper must judge whether even a slight risk exists, and if this slight chance does exist, then he shall note that risk does exist. Risk of collision must be determined in good time by all vessels, small and large. And keep track of a vessel until it is well past and clear of your own vessel. Rule 8. Action to avoid a collision. Rule 8 specifies the actions that must be taken to avoid a collision. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. To avoid a collision, keep in mind that you should adopt the following attitudes. You should always be
positive, make a significant alteration of course and/or speed.
Made in ample time, which means early. Appropriate, do not make the situation worse for any other ship in the vicinity, assess what they may have to do. And, easily seen by other ship or ships, avoid a series of small alterations of course and/or speed. Here's an example of how Rule 8 is applied. The following media illustrates the procedures that the vessels must take to avoid a collision.
Positive action should be taken to avoid a collision. This means that it should reduce the risk of a collision while not aggravating it. Avoiding action should be taken as soon as possible. This implies that the assessment should be done well in advance, over a long period of time, and from a great distance. Avoiding action should not be taken at the last moment. To avoid confusion, action should be taken at an earlier stage and at the appropriate time. Be on your guard and keep an eye on all of your targets. The daytime aspect and the nighttime navigation light aspect may not be significantly affected by slight changes. The path should not be altered in minor increments. Any deviation from the original course must be significant enough for the opposing vessel to detect it and know that you have taken action. As previously indicated, all actions taken to avoid collision must be retrieved after they are taken. These activities should help mitigate the threatening situation. The passing of the vessels should be observed until it is established that we are well clear of the other vessel before moving forward again. Lots of traffic is encountered when ships are in crowded areas or when entering and leaving harbors. The ship may not have chosen a course and the speed may not be sufficient. If you find yourself in this situation, it's best to take a break and monitor how things develop instead of rushing. Once the problem has been evaluated, proceed with caution. To ensure the safety of the vessel, it can even ring astern propulsion if there is not enough time to assess the situation before it becomes critical.
Consider the following points when taking action to avoid colliding with other vessels. Remember, a substantial alteration made early is better than a very large alteration made late. The closer you are to the other vessel, the greater the risk of collision. You'll have less options available and the more you will have to do to pass at a safe distance. Small alterations of course and speed are also dangerous. They do not often solve the problem and they do not give the other vessel a clear indication of what you are doing. And always, keep an eye on your compass bearings and check the situation until the risk of collision is over. If your engine is constrained, then slow down or stop if you need to change course. Rule 9. Narrow channels. Rule 9 advises all vessels traveling through a narrow channel or fairway must stay as close to the outer limit of the channel or fairway which lies on her starboard side as is safe and practicable. The same rule also requires a vessel less than 20 meters long or a sailing vessel not to obstruct the passage of a vessel that can safely navigate only within a narrow channel or fairway. The rule also forbids ships to cross a narrow channel or fairway if such crossing impedes the passage of a vessel which can safely navigate only within such channel or fairway. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. A few more rules explanations is illustrated below.
The next video will explain Rule 9, Narrow Channels.
Narrow channel. Vessels navigating in the narrow channel or fairway are subject to these laws and regulations. When navigating in a narrow channel or fairway, a vessel should keep to the starboard side of the channel or fairway as long as it is safe. It has to take into account elements such as the ship's draft and width in relation to the channel's depth and width. In narrow channels or fairways, vessels shorter than 20 meters or 65.6 feet should not be allowed to obstruct the passage of larger ships. Similar to a sailing vessel, a ship traversing a small canal or fairway should not be disturbed by a sailing vessel. The shallower part of the waterway may always be used by small vessels and sailing craft. Fishing vessels in a fairway. While fishing vessels should not hinder the safe passage of another ship operating in the tight channel or fairway. Crossing vessels in a fairway. A warning is given to crossing vessels to avoid obstructing the safe passage of another ship that is operating within the limited channel or fairway. A vessel can cross the fairway if it does not obstruct the passage of a ship following the channel. Rule 34D allows vessels that are in a narrow channel to sound 5 or more short and rapid blasts to ascertain the intention of the crossing vessel. Overtaking vessels in a fairway. Assuming the vessel behind wishes to overtake, she must sound the signal 2 prolonged blasts followed by 1 short blast to mean, "I intend to pass you on your starboard side." If there is agreement, the ship to be overrun should move to one side of the channel and sound 1 prolonged, 1 short, 1 prolonged and 1 short blast. To overtake the ship from the port side, the ship will fire 2 prolonged blasts followed by 2 short blasts. If all parties are in agreement, the vessel to be overtaken should move to one side and sound one prolonged, one short, one prolonged, and one short blast before moving back to the other side. For example, if the ship in front doesn't understand the signal, she should blow 5 short and rapid blasts on a whistle. In such a case, even with the approval of the ship ahead, the overtaking vessel has the final responsibility to maintain clear, according to Rule 13. Bend and obstructions in a fairway. While nearing a channel bend or obstruction, the vessel should sound one prolonged blast. Any approaching vessel within hearing range should respond to the signal with another prolonged blast. Anchoring in a fairway. Unless absolutely necessary, vessels should avoid anchoring in small channels, save for safety concerns where other vessels should be alerted and extra care should be taken to prevent collisions.
Whenever your vessel is traveling through a narrow channel or fairway, keep in mind the following crucial points. Avoid locations with commercial vessel activity, such as shipping lanes or traffic separation zones, if possible. Large vessels and barges have unique maneuvering challenges and cannot and will not move out of the way.
Maintain your position on the starboard side of the waterway.
Sailing vessels, fishing vessels, and vessels smaller than 20 meters in length are not allowed to obstruct vessels that are restricted to the channel. Vessels that can only operate safely in the channel shall not be obstructed by crossing vessels.
Or, unless in an emergency, do not anchor in a channel.
Rule 10. Traffic separation schemes. The rule states the behavior of vessels in or near traffic separation schemes adopted by the organization. To view the rule provisions, click the button below. Traffic separation schemes will be explained in the following media.
When a vessel is part of the traffic separation system, it must follow all other rules, as well as the traffic separation scheme requirements. When using the traffic separation system, you should navigate in the direction of the lane, and not the opposite direction. The course line should be parallel, or nearly parallel to the direction of the lane. The course should be drawn in the middle of the lane with the edges cleared. Entering or leaving traffic separation scheme. Make the course line link the traffic separation scheme either at the beginning or at the end. If a vessel has to join in the middle, it should do so at a very small angle to the traffic separation system. Similarly, the angle should be minimal while departing in the middle. If possible, vessels should avoid crossing traffic lanes when passing traffic separation schemes. If you can't prevent it, cross the traffic lane at an angle of around 90 degrees to the traffic separation scheme. This would be the shortest trip and would prevent confusion for other vessels. Similarly, if you want to leave the traffic separation scheme, move to the lane edge at an angle before turning. Cross the opposing lane at a 90-degree angle or close to it. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, has designated the inshore traffic zones. However, they should not be used by ships of any size. Use is restricted to vessels less than 20 meters, 65.62 feet, in length, sailing ships, and fishing vessels. The inshore traffic zone can only be used by ships in an emergency. If a vessel is approaching a port, offshore installation, or pilot station, it can also use the inshore traffic zone. When joining or leaving the traffic separation scheme, the ship should be on high alert, with lookouts stationed. At least 2 radars should be operational, the engines should be on standby, and the helmsman should be attentive. As per the company's policy, all emergency solutions should be tried before implementing the traffic separation plan. Except in emergencies, anchoring is not authorized within the traffic separation scheme or surrounding its terminations. Avoid the traffic separation scheme if you don't use it. That way, ships entering or exiting the traffic separation strategy won't get lost in the shuffle. Fishing vessels should not be included in the traffic separation plan when they are fishing. Ships following a traffic separation scheme should not be disturbed by small vessels less than 20 meters, 65.62 feet, in length. Inshore traffic is possible with this type of vessel. Some ships are involved in operations such as repairing or replacing the buoy in the traffic separation scheme. Their maneuverability is limited, and they do not have to adhere to the traffic separation scheme's regulations. Vessels laying, servicing, or picking up underwater cables are exempted from these requirements as well. According to Rule 10(e), a vessel other than a crossing vessel, or a vessel joining or leaving a lane shall not generally enter a separation zone or cross a separation line, except for instant safety in an emergency. The act of fishing within the boundaries of a separate zone. According to Rule 10(j), sailing vessels and vessels less than 20 meters, 65.62 feet, in length are prohibited from impeding the safe passage of power-driven vessels following traffic lanes.
Some additional information on Rule 10 traffic separation techniques is provided below. COLREGs Rule 10 does not supersede other rules. This means that a vessel in TSS must follow other rules in addition to the TSS rules. It recommends how a vessel should move in a traffic separation scheme. At all times, the correct traffic lane must be followed. And smaller vessels less than 65.62 feet in length, including sailing and fishing vessels, must use the inshore traffic zone.